All right, hello to everyone joining us in Washington and California for the California State Society's virtual Golden State Roundtable on going back to college in this unique time of COVID 19. I'm Jim Gelb from the California State University and also from the board of the California State Society. We are excited to have with us today two distinguished members of the California Congressional Delegation. I know they are both limited on time, so without further ado, it is my great pleasure to ask the co-chair of the California State Society and Congressman from the Central Valley, the Honorable Jim Costa, to kick things off and introduce his colleague from San Diego, Mr. Costa.
Thank you very much, Jim, and it's my honor to be a part of our Golden States roundtable discussion today. I think you've got a great panel, and I think led by a colleague and a dear friend of mine who I've served with both here in Washington, D.C. and in Sacramento over the years. Let me just first of all thank all the members of the California State Society for your participation and your involvement. Clearly, those who come from California to our nation's capital to serve in various capacities do so because of the importance we all place on helping others and the passion to want to serve and to make a difference. We come from different journeys, different paths, whether it be working for members of Congress or whether it be working with different administrations or advocating on different California companies or institutions like the higher education system, the University of California or the California State University system or the community colleges. There's so many various capacities under which Californians find their way to Washington. And the State Society has always been, I think, the glue that keeps this collection of Californians together every month, not only with the forums such as we have today, but also on other activities that the California Society participates in. Many of them are important workshops that the California Society sponsors for various cutting edge technologies and for spokespeople that are involved as this California, the bellwether state, continues to make a difference. Some of them are fun things, like the summer picnic, and obviously the festivals that we have going on here. And Molly Allen does a great job in assisting all of us in terms of the effort. I want to make just some brief comments about the challenges we face, and then introduce our honored guest. We just came back from our August recess, and dealing with the challenges of COVID-19. As members of Congress, our responsibilities are first to focus on the health and safety of our constituents, all Californians and the country, and at the same time deal with the devastating economic and social impacts that this pandemic has created, not only throughout our country, but around the world. And it's been a challenge, to say the least. If we were all 7-8 months ago in January having a California Society meeting with a good glass of California wine, and we were trying to predict what might happen if a worldwide pandemic hit, I doubt that many of us could, with any accuracy, imagine the sort of changes that would occur. And some of these changes will be permanent. Take, for example, this Zoom conference. It's not my preference necessarily, but we've learned that we can function in ways that we could never have anticipated before. Susan's office, like my office, we're all working, in many ways harder than we ever have before. Our constituent casework, and I'd like to think we are among the best in California out of my colleagues. Our casework, I think, is the meat and potatoes of any congressional office, whether we're talking about veterans, issues of disabilities, seniors, Social Security, Medicare, working on grants for cities and counties, dealing with all the things a congressional office does. We measure it weekly, we measure it monthly from year to year. And in the first 8 months of this year, our constituent services work has quadrupled, and about almost 80% of it is COVID-19 related. So we are doing our best, and we're not out of the woods yet. And we all hope a vaccine comes sooner than later. But we know that after passing 4 bipartisan packages, we're now working on the 5th. This administration, and I'm not attempting to be partisan, but I think when you use the metrics worldwide, has not done a very good job. The United States, 4.5% of the world's population, and we account for 26% of the positive cases, the people that have tested positive, and 22% of the mortalities. 4.5% of the world's population, 22% of the world's mortalities, and over 26% of people that have tested positive. By any metrics, that is not a good job. On top of that, we are in the middle of fire season, and it has been horrific in California, in Oregon, in Washington. Yesterday, I read where Western states have 87 active fires taking place. We have now in California have over 3.1 million acres that have been burned, and we're only in the middle of fire season. 6 of the largest fires that ever have occurred in California history in the last 20 years have occurred this year. Friday, I went up to the Creek Fire, which is off the perimeters of my congressional district. It's primarily in Congressman McClintock and Congressman Nunes's district, but I have a lot of constituents that have cabins and properties where the fire is located. I spent 6 hours there. It was horrific. It looked like a moonscape. I've got photographs of it. There's this area in Shaver Lake that has been almost in the circumference been burned. Huntington Lake, which is a place that I've been going since I was a kid and where I learned to sail, had an area through the northern portion of the lake in the middle area called Huckleberry and Idlewild, in which over 42 cabins were burned. They had a tornado fire storm, they called it, in which temperatures reached 1,400 degrees and winds blew at 60 to 80 miles an hour, toppling pine trees that were 100, 150 feet tall and taking them literally out of their roots. So clearly, they tell me this fire will probably take another 2 or 3 weeks to completely contain and put out. And then, of course, you've got all the other work that has to be done. As I spoke on the House floor today about that, I said, there are lessons to be learned here. One, we've got to do better forest management. While the president was in California earlier this week, the reality is over 60% of the forest lands in California are federally owned. Only 3% are owned by the state. We've not done a good job, and this goes back 20, 30 years in managing our forests. Number 2, we've got to do a better job in land use planning. We've got literally hundreds and thousands of people living in places today where 30 years ago no one lived. And that adds to the complication of trying to manage these lands, whether they be public or whether they be private. And finally, we've got to deal with the impacts of climate change. and that is real. It is drier, and the periods of these storms become more intense. And you combine these these changes in weather patterns that allow for a situation where the beetle bark can proliferate, drilling into these pine trees, drying them out. We have over 100 million dead trees, it's estimated, between Lassen and Lake Isabella in California. So there's a lot of work we got to do, and we're not, literally or figuratively out of the woods. We still have 3 Category 1 fires in California now, and over 20 fires that are going. And the air quality, I had to fly in here Monday to finally see some blue sky. It's just been, it was 304 in the air index Monday morning when I left Fresno Air Terminal. Now, let me segue over with all the challenges we're dealing here and trying to get some meaningful legislation, a continuing resolution passed before we adjourn on October 2nd. And there is bipartisan agreement on a continuing resolution. I suspect it will go sometime after Thanksgiving. And hopefully we'll pass some other pieces of legislation here in the next 2 weeks. But we can only do this if we work together in a bipartisan fashion. And that's always been, I think, a tribute to the California society, bringing Republicans, Democrats, and independents together to work for the common good, which is the Golden State, which we all share a passion for, the Golden State of California. And no one shares that passion any more than my dear friend, Susan Davis. She is, I think, the quintessential reflection of what a member of Congress ought to be. I know because, as I said, not only have I served with her for 16 years here in Congress, but I served with Susan in the state legislature. And I knew the first time I met her in the 1990s that she was good then, and she's better now. And like a wonderful wine, she's only gotten better with the years. And we know how proud we are of our good wines in California. And I'm so proud of Susan Davis. She has always provided leadership in the Congress. She's provided leadership in every facet of issues that she's been a part of. And she is one of our most respected members of the California delegation, as well as the House of Representatives. She obviously has been passionate about her involvement in the House Education and Labor Committee. And with these panelists that are going to be a part of this roundtable discussion for the California Society, I can think of no better person to lead this discussion than Congresswoman Susan Davis. And on a sad note for me, and I think for many of my colleagues, this is the close of Susan's congressional career. At the end of this term, she will no longer be here. I won't have my friend to go and bug when I need some advice on a legislative matter or on higher education. And I think all of you who know Susan as I do will feel the same way. She is truly a wonderful, wonderful individual who knows her subject matter always and is insightful and reflective. And, that's what you want in a good representative, a listener who is thoughtful and reflective and always offers you her best advice. And that's really the Susan Davis I know. And
thank you, Jim.
No, it's true. And but we've got to keep you involved, because just because you're not going to be a member of Congress doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of productive, good roles you can play. And maybe the University of California or some of our other higher education institutions will be really smart, and they'll hire you as a consultant. And then you can come here and give us your best thoughts. So without further ado, let's give a warm welcome to our dear friend, Congresswoman Susan Davis.
Well, thank you very much, Jim. As you can tell, I didn't want to interrupt you with that wonderful, wonderful introduction. I greatly appreciate it. And it's largely because I really do want to continue to work, certainly in San Diego and for the state of California in some capacity, whatever that might be. But I'm really wanting to thank all the people that are on this call. And I'm looking still at Jim. I'm actually not looking at the whole gallery right now, but I really did want you to know that I'm just so grateful that you're there in the positions that you are in, because we could never have imagined a challenge like this. You know, serving through a pandemic, but working through a pandemic, and all of us adjusting to being virtual human beings all the time has been tough. And I know particularly for our colleges, for our students, for our faculty, for everybody who touches the lives of young people today and helps prepare them for a future. These are unprecedented times, and we all acknowledge that. I'm going to be very brief because I always love listening to Jim, because he has great stories to tell and a wonderful feel for the state on so many different levels. But I did want to say that the collaboration among all of you who are working in the system is so, so critical. I know you learn from one another. And today, I'm sure that you're going to show that to everyone that's on the call as well. We want to return to on-campus living. That's what school is all about. You know, it's so, so critical to all of the students and to the faculty, because we all, Gwen, we learn, we get our energy from one another. And it's important that we have that, but we also have to be safe. And so we have been working here in the Congress, of course, to try and provide some of the resources that are critical to our campuses. And we've done that. I won't go through that long list because it's quite prominent, but we are not feeling well about it. I can tell you that. We have been working on a bill. We passed out the HEROES Act from the House. The Senate has not taken that up. And none of us want to go home now without some additional changes. And we don't want it to be just, you know, token. We want it to be something that is substantial. We were able to do some very good things for students in the CARES Act. But we're not done yet. State and local governments are hurting badly, and we know that our schools benefit from that. So we've just got to get this done. I wish we had the support of everybody from the state, all of our representatives, but unfortunately, that's still been a little short. We've had to reach out and even help students with more nutritional and food service needs. That's a big, big need on campus. It was before COVID. It will be after COVID, but during COVID, it's also very critical. And we know that not just for our college students, but for our K-12 population as a whole. So thank you. That's why I'm here, to say thank you. And I look forward to the discussion, and I particularly look forward to trying to hear how you're solving some of these problems that you never thought you ever would have to solve. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Congresswoman Davis, for being here today, and also for your many years of public service and your tireless focus on educational opportunity and achievement for all Californians. We're going to miss you here in Washington. It is now my pleasure to introduce our panel of experts. They are Winston Crisp, Vice President for Student Affairs at the University of Southern California, Dr. Ronnie Higgs, Vice President for Student Affairs and Enrollment Services at CSU Monterey Bay, Dr. Cynthia Olivo, Assistant Superintendent and Vice President for Student Services at Pasadena City College, and Dr. Allison Satterland, Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs at UC San Diego. To begin, we've asked each of our panelists to speak for a few minutes about a particular area of challenge in the current environment. After they've all had a chance to speak, we'll have some time for some questions and answers. First up is Winston Crisp of USC, who will speak to the challenges related to communicating effectively with students, both on and off campus, about their roles and responsibilities. Mr. Crisp.
Jim, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation and for having me. Representatives Costa and Davis, thank you also so much for your participation and your support for this. And to the members of the California Society, thank you most of all to you for being here and for the invitation. I have only been in California for just over a year. I am a North Carolinian by birth and most of my life. And in that year that I have been at USC, I have come to absolutely love everything about this state and its people. And while the times are certainly tough, I'm grateful to be here, not only for this Zoom today, but in California, working with all of the wonderful people in this state. It is rapidly becoming home to me, and I couldn't be more pleased to be here. So thank you for letting me say that. So I have been asked to talk some about the challenges of communicating with students, particularly during this COVID crisis. And, you know, there are a number of them. Communicating with students even before COVID has its own challenges. They live in a world that has developed very differently from most of us who are in older generations, and just how they interact online and how they interact with the technology. Sometimes there are gaps with us. There's email fatigue, Zoom fatigue. A lot of the normal ways that we would typically communicate with students are trying, even in the best of times. They've become even more trying now that everything is online and all of the communications are online. So just trying to balance the need for frequent communication and the media in which we communicate and having to do multiple media. We're having to use everything we've got, from social media to emails to Zooms to even the creation of new kind of ways to communicate, to try to get messaging out in ways that are going to be helpful. I think that's exacerbated for all of us by the speed of change and the level of uncertainty. I think everyone recognizes that since this really got going in March or so, that the speed of change, we think one thing one day and 3 days later the situation has changed, and so we have to change plans in midstream sometimes, and how we can effectively and with clarity communicate that in a timely manner, even knowing that we may have to communicate changes in short order, and that there are many, many questions that people have and want us to talk about that we don't always have questions for, also adds to some of the challenges. Then we have challenges, I think, of just dealing with just the disappointment of the fact that the dreams, the hopes of all of these college students have been changed in ways that they never anticipated. And so from their mental health to their wellness to their desire to really engage in many ways is having to change, and we're having to look at very different ways of communicating in order to keep up with that change. And then, of course, and I'll stop here, there's also the age and development of the typical, obviously, universities have students that range in age and maturational development from very young to more mature. But in general, it's a pretty young group of people who have had all of their plans sort of upended on them, and so they're struggling for ways to make it all understandable. And so our communications have to take that into account as well. So we are trying, and I'm sure this is true for everyone else on the call, we're trying literally everything. We're doing emails, we're doing videos, we're doing Zooms, we're contracting new ways of communicating out. We're building new technology applications for our students to use, and we're doing trial and error, frankly, with pretty much everything that we can think of. I think I'll stop there, save time for others.
Thank you, Mr. Crisp. And next we will hear from Dr. Ronnie Higgs of CSU Monterey Bay, who will focus on the challenges related to meeting the needs of low-income and minority students in this era. Dr. Higgs.
Thanks, Jim. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this panel. And I do want to welcome also the Congresswoman and the Congressman from the that's representing our state. And thank you for all you do for the state of California. As Jim said, the CSU is one of the largest system in the United States, obviously, and we made the call early to go to online instruction. We just saw the pandemic, and we didn't think it was going to get any better anytime soon. So we were one of the first out of the chute to make that call. And I want to say that this disruption was painful for all students, first of all. But in the CSU, we also have a large majority of low-income students as well as students of color. And this pandemic has hit those cohorts of students harder, I believe, than the rest of our student population. At CSUMB, we have 53% of our students are first generation. 50% of our students are minority, and another 33% are low income. And this is a reflection of the CSU as a whole as well. And when we made that call to go to online instruction, that was a jolt to the students. As Congresswoman Davis has said, we have students who could not go home, actually. We have students who was using our dining services as their only meal opportunity. So when we had to depopulate the campus, we sent everybody home, and we soon found out that we had some other issues that in student affairs that we had to handle. In student affairs, for those of you and my panelists do know this, we are that department, we are that division that have to handle everything that concerns a student. And so this just was another added challenge to what we do every day. We wrongly assumed that all students had technology access. And we also assumed that all students had some kind of computer equipment. Well, we quickly found out that that was not the case. So thank goodness that Congress passed the CARES Act, and we used those dollars, for instance, once we found out that there was a shortfall in this particular area, we used that money to help students purchase laptops. We purchased hotspots. We also created a laptop loaner program as well, so that at least they had the means to at least get their homework done and their schoolwork done. We also went back to the financial aid and packaged a computer equipment purchase in their cost of attendance. We heard this when we sent out surveys to our students to find out what challenges do you have that we probably did not think about. So we got this feedback from those students. And we then tried to do whatever we need to do to make their life a little bit easier. We also found out that the students missed that sense of engagement, that connectivity that they always had, those late night dining hall get-togethers, those late night study sessions. And we found that the students of color and low income students, they really cherish those kinds of events. So what I asked my student activities folks to do was to create that sense of belonging and connectivity in the virtual world. So we ramped up our virtual activities and put some things together to give those students that sense. We have our TRIO programs that we ramped up as well. As you know, that adds some additional student support for those students who are low income and first generation. So we leaned on that a lot more. And another thing that we did, and I think Winston mentioned this, is that we actually did some more outreach to students. We wanted to make sure that we personalized our communication with some of these students because, again, they were used to being able to walk into any office and ask for help. We found out that some of these students were not good online students. Online is not for everybody. So we ramped up our tutorial services as well. We asked our faculty to do some additional reach out and have some additional Zoom hours. They came through with that. And in turn, we found out from the spring semester to the fall semester, we retained about 97% of our students of color and our low-income students. So some of those additional things that we did to make sure that we touched those students paid off. So again, we're pleased that we are doing some good things. We had only had 1 week to prepare in the spring for that transition to online instruction. So we know we missed the boat on a couple of things. So we continue to have once a month student Zoom hall meetings. The president, myself, and the provost, we actually do these once a month so that we can continue to get feedback from students, to continue to hear their concerns, and then we make those adjustments as we go. So I believe in this fall, we're in better shape than we were in the spring, and we'll continue to do what we need to do until this pandemic eases. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Higgs. Really appreciate that. And our next panelist is Dr. Allison Sutherland of UC San Diego, and she'll talk about UCSD's return to learn efforts, including engagement with students and lessons learned on testing and tracing in this environment. Dr. Sutherland.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it. And I'm really honored and delighted to be a part of this effort and to share the good work of colleagues all across the region. And we've stolen a lot of great ideas from folks in the CSU and our private college and university partners, both at home in California and across the country. So I wanted to just give a quick overview on what we lovingly refer to as our Return to Learn program. And we're also in a very fortunate position in that as a research university who also has an affiliated health system and medical system and medical school, we are well positioned to do some of this work that many colleges and universities by nature of design don't have. So I really want to acknowledge the great privilege that UC San Diego and many of our UC counterparts have in offering this plan that other folks who are doing this incredible work without this same resource should be acknowledged for. So just quickly, our Return to Learn program is an adaptive model because if there's ever a time where you need to adapt, it's during a pandemic. It's really built on 3 pillars: risk mitigation, viral detection, and intervention. And so, basic risk mitigation, are we cleaning and sanitizing our spaces, and have we engaged in the social norming efforts around good hygiene and physical and social distancing and making face coverings and PPE available for free to students, faculty, and staff? And have we organized our workspaces and our lab spaces in such a design so that physical distancing can occur? And have we deployed our essential workforce around cleaning and sanitation in the right spaces at the right times, and to ensure that all of our learning environments and our living environments and work environments are clean? In terms of our viral detection efforts, we're making available at no cost to students, faculty, and staff COVID-19 testing, both for symptomatic and asymptomatic offerings. We also are very fortunate to have wastewater detection as a part of our efforts as well. And we got a dry run last week, and we're able to identify within the wastewater a hit for COVID-19, and that allowed us to implement our tracing and tracking efforts in that regard. And we're in the process of adding to our wastewater environmental monitoring efforts to additional buildings around our campus. We know this is a particularly powerful tool in fighting the spread of COVID-19. And of course, working very closely with the public health department in the county and city of San Diego. And then using intervention. We are also fortunate, we have a large residential footprint on our campus. And so we have set aside a minimum of 660 residential single times and are working to build that up to 1,000 rooms for isolation as needed. We have a fantastic partnership with our Dean of Public Health, Dr. Cheryl Anderson, who has built a contract tracing effort for us. And we launched last week an innovative tool that we had seen around the world and country, exposure notification. We're in the process of implementing that on the back end and making that available to our students next week. and then just using the great science that's available to us at UC San Diego, contributing to the development of vaccines and providing excellent healthcare. I wanted to also offer just some of the quick numbers around as we start to move to welcoming students back, which we'll be doing as of this Saturday. We'll be seeing about 6,000, a little over 6,000 undergraduates join us on campus. They'll be moving in over a period of 10 days, all testing prior to move-in. We do have 88 students who are from across the world who are isolating with us right now for 14 days, and we'll be integrating into our residential communities also the expectation for twice monthly COVID-19 testing. And if you are living off campus and participating in an in-person class, of which we anticipate about 10% of our undergraduates will be doing for participate in twice monthly COVID-19 testing. And this is a complement also to our daily symptom checker that all students are expected and encouraged and rewarded for doing so. And then also we have invested in what we know is particularly important for this age group, social norming campaigns and engagement for safer community efforts. And we've done quite a bit of email, as Mr. Chris mentioned. Students are so over email. It works for us older folks, but we've really been trying to do a lot of work on social media using Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, inviting our students to create the social norming campaign, student conduct code. We've hired 170 student health ambassadors, just stole a great idea from the University of Miami in that regard. And those students will be around campus distributing free masks, giving out gift cards for students that they see practicing great healthy behaviors as well. We've hosted, like Dr. Higgs mentioned, that very important town hall. We have town halls. You've got to keep communication going, particularly in a crisis, and we just can't seem to do enough of that. And then really framing our messages with the information and guidance from our public health experts. That's been particularly helpful and informative, but really spending the majority of our time teaching our students how to participate in the healthy behaviors around symptom and exposure screening, why it's important to wear a mask, and reducing barriers to access to testing, having drive-through testing sites, making our testing available across San Diego, because we know not all of our students live on campus with us. We are, again, fortunate that we have testing available at all of our UC San Diego health sites. And then framing our engagement around testing and tracing as a commitment that we all do to keep the community healthy. I think one thing that we have learned from our public health faculty and experts is that, shaming does not change behavior. It tends to drive it underground. So how do we use positive reinforcement and celebration, as well as clarity around expectations and appropriate sanctions to encourage and support our students in keeping themselves and the community healthy? I think that's been our most significant challenge. As Dr. Higgs and Mr. Crisp mentioned, we're having to shift hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of students' social and health behaviors in a matter of weeks and days. And we've seen, I'll just say, older, more experienced folks also really challenged with this particular effort. So if with our tracing and tracking efforts, working with our student leaders, we have brought together a remote student experience task force that's co-led by student leadership. And we've been working on the development of a fall 2020 health coalition just with student leaders, really around social norming, healthy behaviors, and engaging students in the work of keeping themselves and each other healthy. And then we have really reinforced with resources our tracing and tracking on the back end, because that's where we'll be most successful in slowing the spread. So I really just want to acknowledge that this work is ongoing every day, and we have to be in partnership with our students, or we won't be able to return to the in-person learning environment, which we know is both developmentally appropriate, but also critical for the development of healthy democratic communities. We need to be together in community.
Thank you so much, Dr. Satterland, and good luck with the big move-in. Our final panelist, Dr. Cynthia Olivo of Pasadena City College. We've asked her to focus on preparing to serve such a diverse array of students with widely different academic goals, from personal enrichment to career skills to associate degree. Dr. Olivo.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate the invitation to share a little bit about California community colleges and my college in particular. And, you know, we are 4 weeks into our term so far. This is the 4th week of instruction for our students. We serve 25,000 students, and we are an Hispanic serving institution with 51% of our students being Latinx. And I do want to mention that we are really grateful that the federal government provided additional funding for those of us who are HSIs. You know, serving the diverse student population that we have in community colleges, we have students pursuing career and technical education programs that are providing those essential skills that our state and our nation need at this time. You know, especially, for example, we prepare the nurses and the EMTs and the firefighters who are out there, you know, fighting the good fight at this time with the fires that are engulfing California. And so many of our career and technical ed programs are meeting in person. And we've had to figure out ways to do that safely to also reduce risk of exposure to our students and our faculty. And so we're thankful that the CARES funding provided the means for us to purchase personal protective equipment to issue to students, as well as COVID testing protocols to put in place. We have an app where we have employees log their symptoms. It's a symptom checker. So these are the kinds of things that we're able to do. Of course, because let's say there are certain facilities where our normal closing number for enrollment of a specific course may have been 30, we've reduced it so that the number of individuals in a facility is not exceeding the guidelines from the public health department. So that's been a huge change for many of our allied health programs, for example. So, you know, this is what we've done in regards to career and technical education. You know, we also serve a huge population of students who have a dream of transferring to one of your universities, right, in your university systems. And so we are doing all the work that we can in order to provide virtual services. And I would say one of the most positive aspects that has come from this pandemic is the spirit of innovation from our faculty, staff, and employees. So we've created Zoom drop-in hours. It's just started as Zoom drop-in hours to try and recreate that ability for a student to walk into an office and get help. You just push a button and a person will appear on a screen and virtually be able to help you. And so now it's morphed into what we call the Virtual Support Center at Pasadena City College. It's offered daily, and we've provided cross-training so that students just have to go to this one virtual place and get support. So we're offering our transfer workshops for students to get help with their transfer applications, the ability to meet with representatives from your systems as well as your individual institutions. Students are still able to get all of the services that were available in person virtually, so that our transfer goals that our students have are not diminished in this environment. We are working more relentlessly, I would say, because we don't want the pandemic or the other pandemic of racism that we're all attuned to now, because we've had to be so still and so observant of things that are happening in our country. Now we're working more relentlessly to ensure that we're doing everything possible to protect and preserve the goals and dreams that our students have. And so transfer is still, we're still pursuing it with a robust energy. Now, the California community colleges, and we still also provide personal enrichment. And, these are for students who are looking to, for example, learn English, right? Earn their high school diploma, just brush up on skills, let's say, if they're trying to upskill from one position to the next. So we're still offering many classes to help our students with these personal enrichment goals. And, I would just say that we are doing everything possible to be responsive and to provide all of the services and support our students need. And one of the practices that we've put in place that potentially could be useful for other institutions is I've generated a report of which students have logged into the learning management system or which students have not. So the students who have not yet logged in at the start of week 4, we're reaching out to say, do you need a laptop? Do you have access to Wi-Fi? Is there something the college can do to help you? Because we see that you've not yet logged into the LMS. And, it also gives us an opportunity to identify any patterns of behavior on the side of instruction to see if there's some kind of support we need to provide our faculty members to utilize the learning management system. So we're trying to identify indicators that help us as an institution reach out to the student to help the student. And another report that I generated was for our African American students. Have our African American students received their financial aid Pell Grants yet? And so that helped me see we have several hundred African American students who we are going to personally support through that FAFSA completion process. So I think this environment is allowing us to be really focused and to be innovative and really show that culture of care that we all have worked so hard to implement in person. Now we just translate it to the virtual setting. And that's, some of what is happening at Pasadena City College. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Olivo. Thank you all for covering such a wide array of unusual circumstances that you're dealing with. I would like to let the attendees know that you're welcome to submit questions through the Q&A function on the Zoom, and we'll do our best to get to them, time permitting. We have a few questions prepared. I'll start off with one. I'll ask Mr. Chris from USC to begin. The environment for student organizations and activities really has been transformed dramatically by the pandemic. What has your campus been doing to sustain or reimagine those things at this time?
Well, thank you for the question. I will try to be quick and brief given the time constraints, but I'll also say that, just being on this panel and listening to the other panelists, we're all doing the same kinds of things. So most of the things that they were talking about are things that everybody is doing, and hopefully we're even learning some more stuff from each other today. So that's good. But this is an issue that is a big one, and that I'm not sure was really high on the radar in the ways that we've experienced it when we first started. What was obvious, USC, for example, has over 1,000 different recognized student organizations, many of them with very specific purposes, from working within the engineering school to create rockets and different things like that, to fraternities and sororities and everything in between. And they all have different purposes and they all have different needs. Many of them, purposes were built around being together. whether we're talking about intramural sports or whether we're talking about the many, many purposes. A theme that runs through all of them is that most of these organizations are built around the students gathering together to pursue the purposes of the organization. So a lot of that we have been dealing with in the same way we've been dealing with the things that Dr. Olivo and others have talked about in terms of trying to create everything from tools to let them create meetings to giving them the technology to figure out how to gather together differently, to working towards trying to help them think through. So what does this mean for our organization? If you're an organization that exists to go camping together, right? And I'm just making that up, forgive me, but you can't really do that under these circumstances. And so the question is out there, does the organization just disband, or does it just fold, or does it just go on hiatus until things come back? So on the one side, we've been working hard to create, reaching out. We've got leadership councils that we're bringing together to sort of talk with the groups, to provide them services and tools to help them figure out how to think through, do we keep doing what we're doing, what we've been doing and just online? Do we actually think about some changes in the organization or things like that? The other thing that I would mention that I'm not sure I really saw coming was that we now have a pretty good amount of mental anxiety and sort of mental health challenges in the leadership of these student organizations, because in some ways you have to think about them in the same position that we're all in, that they're students, and yet they've taken on the responsibility and they're trying to figure out how to manage their organization and feeling all of that pressure. And so now we're having to figure out how to provide help and resources to the student organizational leaders in this arena so that they can maintain health and wellness while they're trying to figure that out. So this is really a big piece. And one side of it is just trying to provide tools and guidance and advice to help them retool. And the other side of it is to keep understanding the stresses and strains and the particular pressures that are caused in this area so that we can provide services there as well. I'll stop there. Somebody else may want to add on, I don't know.
Sounds like a monumental task. Did any of the other panelists want to comment on that subject?
Jim, I think I would only add that, you know, our teams are so creative. You know, Dr. Higgs mentioned that student affairs folks are often called on to save the day a bit, right? So our teams have put together podcasts, and we redeployed a full-time position to a director of remote student engagement, in part because we knew that our students would need the back-end support that our advisors didn't have the bandwidth to do. So it's also, I think, allowed us to be more creative. You know, Dr. Olivo spoke to this too, like the spirit of innovation around out of classroom engagement, I think has also really been motivating for a lot of us, because we want all of our students to have the most healthy and thoughtful and transformative experience possible in spite of the circumstances.
Thank you for that. Switching a little bit more to the academic side, Dr. Higgs, in general, how have students adapted to the online modality, and have there been changes in student achievement and progress to degree that you've seen?
Yeah, we were concerned about that, as I said earlier, that the transition from in-person to online, everybody was not conditioned to just arbitrarily become a great online student. So we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to engage those students, and we had to ramp up our advising, for instance, in the online version of advising. Winston just mentioned that you still had these issues that did not go away. You still have students with mental health issues. You still have students who needed that touchy-feely kind of a thing. So what we asked our faculty to do was, again, to make sure they did a little bit more outreach to those students, increase their office hours, whether it was Zoom or whatever, and the faculty did come through with that particular thing. We also wanted to make sure that we were hearing that students were going to just drop out and take a gap year, or because of health and safety concerns, they were just not going to go. So even in the pre-registration activity for our continuing students, we asked the faculty to set some class time so that those students could register, and they did that. And so you had a captured audience in class, and that helped our retention, like I said earlier. So we just really concentrated on those things that we knew that will help those students. And one thing that I want to mention too is we also had to do some faculty development. We did not think about faculty having to transition to online instruction as well. And some faculty weren't prepared for that. And if you don't have a good experience in online instruction, students were going to drop out. So we quickly made sure that the faculty also had an opportunity to do some training to make sure that their lesson plans were on par with what the students expected. So those are just some few things, Jim, that we did. And we think we only have one semester or a half semester, so we really don't have the evidence right now to see the results of what students have done. But so far, we think we're on the right track.
That's good. And I know time is getting short, but Dr. Olivo, I was just curious if you had any thoughts on that subject with the online experience.
I would say our students are very resilient, and they've learned to adapt to Zoom instruction, as well as learn new terminology, synchronous and asynchronous. That's new concepts to our students. So I've seen them to be very resilient. And, you know, it takes part of the institution to make sure we're looking for indicators where students need support, because sometimes our students are not going to let us know that they are having difficulties. I would say we're really beefing up our co-curricular engagement as well. Seeing that our students are extremely politically engaged at this time in our country. We are, for example, the 3 days this week hosting a social justice career conference. And we're helping students understand they can pursue social justice in any career that they're pursuing. And we have around 1,000 students that are registered to attend one of the social justice career conference strands. All virtual. So, you know, it's we're able to build upon their classroom experience and bridge to student engagement, student life. And I see that they're really responding and trying to adapt to this new normal. And I love, you know, I participate in a lot of professional development webinars, as do many of my faculty and staff and the rest of my colleagues at the college. And a few weeks ago, Dr. J. Luke Wood hosted a webinar with Dr. Gloria Latson-Billings, who said, now is the time for a reset of our entire higher ed system. And a pandemic brings that opportunity for that reset. So we're trying to do just that. And I see that our students are doing it too.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we're at the end of our hour. I want to, first of all, we had a nice question come in about graduate and international students that unfortunately we'll have to put off for another time. But thank you to all of the panelists and all of your institutions for supporting the Golden State Roundtable. It's been very informative. Thank you to the attendees for coming and listening, and to our members of Congress that joined us. Good luck with the rest of the semester and planning for the spring. And we'll look forward to the next State Society events, including for future Golden State Roundtables. Thank you all very much.
All right. Be well. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.